is not the regular, this is that boom, blah, blah, blah. Some they call it secular, I just call it black, black, black. Marcus Garvey, Bookman Dottie, bring that army back, back, back. Malcolm X and Kwame Ture, this is where I'm at. If you wanna talk to me about black, black, black. Haile Selassie the first, Negus Nagas, let's talk about that. Kaboom, Nanny Maroon and all the Maroons, let's talk about that. The real Underground Railroad, the first subway for black, black, black. The freedom train begins with your brain, get in on track. Whether justice or injustice, how do you react? Can you stand there laughing while they shoot us in the black, black, black? This is what some rappers sound like every time they rap. I'm raising up the red and the green and the black, black, black. Even with no cops in the hood, we still hear click, click, clack, clack, clack. I cannot forget my ancestors just because I rap. Look at me from top to bottom. KRS is black, black, black. Get up, get out, speak out.
Mahmoud El-Kati is a lecturer, author, and commentator on the African American experience. El-Kati is Professor Emeritus of History at Macalester College in St. Paul, Minnesota. Professor El-Kati is the author of Politically Considered, 50th Commemoration of the Supreme Court Decision of 1954. He's also author of the Dictionary, Survey of African American Speech Patterns with Critical Commentary and a Digest of Words and Phrases. He's also author of Haiti, The Hidden Truth, also The Myth of Race, The Reality of Racism, Critical Essays, and Zola Shines, a Kwanzaa children's book. He's also editor of Towards an African Education, Selected Writings on the Education and Development of Children of African Heritage. And today's topic will be Black History Month, its origins and purpose. Mahmoud El-Kati.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Well, it's not evening, it could be morning or noon. However, blessings to you all, and we'll take a little time just to talk about this very important event, in effect, in the people's history of African people, not simply in the United States, but in the world. But our focus is on the African American experience in the United States of America, which was organized in 1787 by what we call the American Constitution, in which black people are included in the first article, section 3, as 3/5 of other persons. You've got to keep that in mind about African people's relationship to the United States of America. By the United States, I mean Uncle Sam, the federal government, the government that established this nation state called the United States of America. Black people have been part and parcel of this American experience since its inception. And yet, in the minds of too many people, we're not here. And this is what Ralph Ellison meant when he wrote the classic work, Invisible Man. He was referring to black people when he wrote that I am an invisible man. No, I am not one of your Hollywood ectoplasms. Nor am I one of the spooks out of the stories of Edgar Allan Poe. I'm a man of substance, of fiber, of liquid, of bone. And it might be said that I possess a mind, but I am invisible, you understand, simply because people refuse to see me. And the reason why people don't see me is because of the way American history is recorded. That's one example of invisibility. But this is a great year for us. It's 2021. It's already earmarked by the recent events, just a little over a month. So I'm going to talk a bit about the origin and purpose of African American History Month. That's very important because there's a vast amount of confusion about what this commemoration, celebration is, what it's for, how it got here, and so forth. You hear all kinds of crazy stuff, people, and I'm not blaming anybody, certainly not black people. You don't blame people for they don't oppress themselves, the forces that oppress them and confuse their minds, and we're like oppressed people all over the world. We get confused about who we are. The fundamental question of all people must ask themselves time and again, who am I? Where did I come from? Whither am I bound? That's Job in the Bible, and that's a recurring theme in human history. And now is the time that black people have been called again to tell the world who they are, where they come from, and where are we going. African American History Month has a history of its own. It didn't come out of the sky. This is the 95th anniversary of the observance, commemoration, celebration, however you want to put it, of what we call African American History Month. That's 95 years, almost 100 years. African Americans in America have, in some form, have been observing, celebration, taking account of themselves in this republic. It didn't come out of the sky, African American History celebration. It comes from a human mind, like almost everything that we call reality. So this observance has been around, as I said earlier, for 95 years. And it began in 1926. And it's the creation of a man who most of us have never heard of, named Carter J Woodson. I'm not talking to you who read books and keep up in black newspapers and stuff. I'm talking about the average person who is black, intelligent, sometimes well-educated, don't know who Dr. Carter J. Woodson was. It's just a fact. I'm not arguing with you, trying to debate with you. I've been teaching a little while now, so I feel a little confident in saying some of the things that I'm saying that some people just don't know, and sometimes we don't know what we're talking about. You know, you hear black people argue that they gave us the coldest month. They, who is they? White people? No. And the shortest month, and that sort of thing. I had a dear friend whom I love, Dick Gregory, the great comedian, say that, but he was joking, but people take him seriously when he said they gave us the coldest and shortest month of the year. They, meaning white people. No, this is a creation of a black human being, and his name was Carter J. Woodson. And he was born in 1875. That's 10 years after slavery. Let me say a word or two about Dr. Woodson. It's an incredible story. I dare Hollywood to make a story on the life of Carter J. Woodson, who was born in what we call now Virginia, in the coal mines. He was 10 years after slavery, 1875. Most of the people in the little village he was born into, like his parents, could not read and write. He was one of the earliest ones as a child to grasp the magic. That's what black people call reading and writing. That's what it is. It is magic. You think about it. You draw a circle and it means zero. You know, it's magic. And he was one of the earliest, and this was a commonplace scene during the Reconstruction period. That's 1875. It's about to come to an end. But children were teaching their parents, grandparents, how to read and write. And they got it from the abolitionists who came down south after the victory of the North over the South to help transform the South into a democratic society. That never happened, and it's never happened in America. We're still struggling for this elusive democracy because most of us, again, most Americans have no idea what democracy, I'm talking about white people too, not just us, what democracy is and what it means and how it came about. They just don't know. Partly, I don't mean scholars, I don't mean people who run think tanks. I'm not talking about them. They know what democracy is. And they're scared to death that more people are going to find out what it is. And it's what makes this year so significant. People are learning how to practice democracy. Anyway, it didn't happen in the South and it never happened in the North. And we're still struggling for that elusive thing called democracy, free, open society where a man can be a man, a woman, and a child. End of discussion. It should be that, nothing more. Well, Woodson is a little boy. He's one of the carrier from slavery. He worked in the mines, like his ancestors prior to him. Virginia was coal mining country. Slaves did every kind of work you could imagine, not just in the cotton fields, the rice fields, and the tobacco fields, and so forth. That we imagine that the African American people who were enslaved by this country did every sort of labor that you could imagine. There was over 100,000 skilled artisans among these slaves who picked the cotton and chopped the tobacco and stirred rice paddies. They did everything from building Thomas Jefferson's home, the great Monticello, to the capital of the United States. Black labor built the American White House. Historians know this. Scholars know this. People who run think tanks know this. People who control the archives know this. But most Americans don't. Not just black Americans, white Americans don't know. They know perhaps more than black people because they have the vaults. They keep this stuff in. So, but they think about that. And the War of 1812 has come up again and again. And the first time this land was invaded by a foreign power was Britain in 1812. It was a 2-year war, it was a long war, but Britain invaded the United States, burnt down the White House. The black people who built the White House, who were still building the White House, had not finished the interior decoration of the house. That's the White House you see now is not the original White House. It was built by black people built it twice. And you got to see, I'm going to depart a little bit from what I'm saying, but God bless Michelle Obama. Because this is what black people, she's well educated, responsible. What we call education means schools. That's not what I think education is altogether. Going to school is a part of it. But she had enough sense, other than the Harvard degree, to tell black children that when they introduced themselves to the community as First Lady and President, and most of the children that she addressed were black children, and she pointed out to them, the first thing before I get into my address and talking to you, I want you to know that your ancestors built this White House. I don't care who says what. The people know this. It's not just me. That's courage to me when a person has courage to try to tell the truth, because that's what we represent. Not better than other people, but we represent some kind of truth in this American story. And I'm not going to argue with white people about that. Some of them know what I'm talking about when I say some kind of truth that we represent. And it's right before us now. That's what we're fighting over. This is over the truth. You know, whether or not black people are human beings or not. White people have said in varying degrees that you are not a fully fleshed human being. That's what the race problem is about. Nothing else. That black Americans are not recognized as human beings, which is why you have a Black History Month in the mind of J Woodson, who was a child, and he learned how to read very early. And the folklore about him, this may or may not be true, is that when he went into mines to work, because the mines are pitch black, he had a book reading right up until he went into the mines, and he put this little book in his back pocket and go into the mines and put in a 6 or 8 hour day, come out, take that book up, and he taught people how to read and write. So this is back in the 1870s, 1880s. He was allowed to, got the opportunity to get some education even further, that he went to school in Kentucky, which was at that time an integrated school. Kentucky has a very funny history as a state. It couldn't make his mind up about whether they want to be on the south or the north. Kentucky is one of the southern states that didn't join the rebellion, but they said literally it's one of the border states. They didn't join the rebellion. Missouri didn't join the rebellion. Part of Virginia didn't join the rebellion. That's why you have West Virginia. And Maryland and Delaware didn't join the rebellion. There were 11 states out of the South who declared war against the United States of America. They formed their own country, their own government, their own Senate, their whole president, and so forth, and committed treason against the United States of America. That's what needs to be said loud and clear right now. The South was wrong and the North was right, according to the morals of the North at that time. That we are right and they're wrong. We don't want slavery anymore in the United States of America. The people in the South said, in effect, we wouldn't know what the world is without slavery. We built a whole lifestyle around a whole social system around the slaves, with our language, our food, the way we talk, and so forth, has to do with this peculiar institution, as they call it, which was the engine of our wealth, and not only the wealth of the South, but the wealth of the United States of America. The South, at one point in American history, was the fourth largest economy in the world, a region, not the United States, a region, because the tobacco and the cotton and the indigo and the rice and the sugar were world crops, and they went all over the world from these plantations in the South and made people rich all over the world, not just in the South. You see the big mansion, but it was New York, Wall Street, people in London, people in France, all over the world. The clothing industry based on black labor. In any event, this magnificent human being, Carter G. Woodson, was almost consumed by the notion of gathering information and knowledge about his people. And after he graduated from college in Kentucky, it was an integrated college founded for black people, ex-slaves, and poor white people in Kentucky. The college still stands. From there, he went to the University of Chicago to earn a master's. From there, he went to Harvard University, and he is the third, back in the day, third Negro to earn a PhD from Harvard. And he graduated in 1912. This is what white supremacy means. When Carter G. Woodson finished his studies and was ready to present his dissertation to the members of the faculty who would pass judgment on him, they gave him hell. It was down the country. In fact, he had to sue to get his PhD in 1912. And he was after Du Bois and Grenier, there were only two people ahead of him earned a PhD. I didn't say there were black people who went to Harvard and earned undergraduate degrees. But he went there, and one of the first things he did 4 years later was he organized the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History in 1916. and organized a small staff to search, to find, or wherever you could find the facts about the story of black people. It brought him around the world. He went to Europe, studied the role of black people in Europe. He went to Latin America, saw a little bit of China. He went all over the world studying self-financed, by self-financed, a handful of black people, no Rockefeller Foundation money, underwrote his endeavors. I want to say just as an aside, one of my teachers, the late, great John Henry Clark, who was a young man in Harlem when he was about 18, 19, 20 years old, saw Dr. Woodson. He remembered Dr. Woodson selling, back then, Negro history books out of his little rumble seat car, out of the trunk. He would stop on a corner and pass the book. I knew a man who not knew him, but saw him in his act. The late, great John Henry Clark saw Carter G. Woodson working for black people, you see. He founded the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History in Chicago. It's moved from Chicago to Washington for most of his life, and now it's in Silver Spring, Maryland. It has 3 places. In other words, he founded, listen to this, an institution. That's what he did. That's what saves black people. You got to build institutions. So he built the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, and the second thing he did was he founded 2 publications. He founded the African American publication, a book for lay people, in the Negro History Bulletin, for scholars, for people to encourage people to work and dig up the facts about African Americans. Now here's an interesting tale, and I hope I can get this one in. Black people had always tried to celebrate themselves. What we call the Black National Anthem was written in 1900 by James Weldon Johnson. That was for Emancipation Proclamation Day. That was the 35th anniversary of our freedom from slavery. We had been celebrating Emancipation Proclamation Day, but it got lost in the chaos of white supremacy and the destruction of the programs that had been set up in the South. Called Reconstruction. And so it kind of got lost. And he wrote this great song, which we sang today, and offered it to the leadership of America as the national anthem of America, which is much more becoming than that thing that we're singing now, called the Star Spangled Banner, about wars and guns and so forth. Nobody has a national anthem like that. Listen to the Canadian national anthem. Listen to England's national anthem. It's not like that. And for your information, I don't tell anybody I told you this, the Star Spangled Banner, the music has been around since the 1600s. And the songs that went with them, with old English drinking songs, went with that music. And, go say, can you see, and so forth. The words were written after the music was here. And the Star Spangled Banner was just adopted in 1931. That's just a minute ago. So let's salute Kaepernick, this young, brave warrior who happened to play football, but he's way beyond that. So Woodson founded an organization, 2 publications, and then in 1926, he founded what we knew then as Negro History Week. Now his Negro History Week was in February. Why? Because the greatest voice of 19th century, for me, for freedom, for dignity, for justice, for humanity, was Frederick Douglass. We don't know the exact date, because he was a slave until he was about 20 years old. But we claim he was born in February. We claim he was born in 1817 or 18. We don't know. But we know when Abraham Lincoln was born in February 14th. So he chose the 2 men who were associated with black freedom in the minds of the popular mind, the great emancipator, and Frederick Douglass, who worked to emancipate us. 2 of his sons were in the Civil War, 2 of his sons. he advised Lincoln. He was a great advisor of Abraham Lincoln. They met 3 times, and Lincoln said something in the so-called second inaugural address where he talked about the unrequited labor of black people. And Douglas asked for an audience to see him, to talk to him. And Lincoln did. This was the first time they met on the second inaugural. He wanted to see Lincoln. Lincoln wanted to see him. And when they sat down at the table, as I'm sitting down across from the gentleman right now, Lincoln wanted to know what Douglas thought of his inaugural speech. And because and you look at that second inaugural, it talks about unrequited labor, unpaid labor mentioned. And Douglas said to him, when he said, "What do you think of the speech?" He said, "I thought it was a sacred moment because you had the nerve to mention. You could have just said it right out. It's about. I mean, they could have just started talking about reparations. But he said unrequited labor. And Douglas, because they were of high caliber in the language. Douglas was equal to anybody in this country who ever spoke the English language. I didn't say that. People in England said that. So don't get on me. I'm black and white people who come down. Oh, he's black. And he's for black people. I'm for black people plus all other people. How is that? And I talk to all people. I'm not afraid of any audience. There are white people who wouldn't talk to black people. You know that as well as I do. They're in the Congress. So he established, that's why it's in February. When I was a child, 5th, 6th, 7th grade, there was Negro History Week already established in 1926. I can remember I had so many wonderful teachers in the lower grades. But anyway, Miss Crayon, children, let's get ready, for the second week in February, because that's the week that Abraham Lincoln and we think Frederick Douglass was born. That's why it was in February. It was Negro History Week up until 1972. And I want to thank the black students who came to the colleges as a result of the Black Studies movement, brought hundreds of black students to colleges all across the nation. And they brought that tradition with them out of their little segregated schools, YMCA, community houses. It wasn't generally known like it is now. There are a lot of black people who didn't know there was a Black History Week, Black History celebration, until 1972, when the black students brought it to the universities, the big institutions, and the people, big institutions, University of Minnesota, Yale, Harvard, Princeton, they all have Black Studies Department. Incidentally, Minnesota has one of the oldest Black Studies Department, whatever you think, in America. It's over 50 years old now. How can you say that? I know that because I was there. I can talk this way now. Get mad at me. I was there. I helped write the damn thing. I get torn up sometimes talking about that. But anyway, it has nothing to do with coldness, short month, and so forth. This comes out of the brain of a black man who gave us Black History Week and then month. In 26 History Week up until 72, and not only that, the students went to his organization, Association for the Study of African American Life and History. Now they changed the word because students asked them to change it from Negro to African American. No Negro ever came out of Africa. That's nonsense. That's stupid. That's a part of the slaveocracy. That's white supremacy. I mean, I'm not calling you stupid. Okay, I didn't mean that. But I'm saying there are people who've always known that, black people. There are people who found the African American, who found the AMEs. Know that. That's why I see the African Episcopal Church. That's why it's called that. That's why you have an African meeting house, 1806, in Boston, Massachusetts, right now. People knew they were African. The white people imposed that on us through literature. So you went to school, for instance, I'm a grandmother boy, never used the word Negro. It was colored. Mm-hmm. That colored man. Oh, you see the beautiful colored children. So they talked. I went to school to learn how to say Negro. Don't call myself Negro. Talking to her, I don't know what that is. She used to say, well, where does the Negro grow? You know, the older people knew better, but they didn't have the power to teach us that we were not Negroes. And incidentally, I'm sorry, no human beings name themselves for their color. That's new in the world. It's new to white people. They brought it out. No human beings. All human identity begins with land, language, and religion, or some form of expression of religion. Now you ask anybody from anywhere in the world, who are you? No, I don't mean no. He's going to say, I'm French. I'm German. Not I'm white. That's crazy. There's no white language. There's a German language. There's no white religion. They kind of made that by imposing whiteness over the Christian religion. Now, so it has exploded. And what it has done since 1972, it has helped a lot of black people learn more about their history. If I had some way of asking black people, being in charge of something, I'd ask all of us to turn to the East, where we came from, and say all praise is due to Carter J. Woodson. Thank God for him. That idea, everything begins with an idea, and he made that idea a reality in our lives, and it's helped us grow up. I don't care what you say, what your level of education is. That's a gift from a great black man to black people. He loved us. And I ain't talking about no poo-poo Hollywood love. That's you gotta get beyond that now. This is a deep and abiding love for a people. That's what he has, and he gave us that, and we're lucky to have a man like him. Du Bois knew him. They knew he came. He was the third one after Du Bois to get a PhD from Harvard. They were once partners. Du Bois and it had something to do with Black History Month during the early days. He made a contribution, but I don't know whenever they parted, when they parted, or why they parted. But Carter J. Woodson is a great human being. You can't make Hollywood dare not touch a life like that. Yeah. Well, what can I say that Carter J. Woodson told us this. This is our condition that we're fighting. If you give a man a history, you give him a personality. If you give him a personality, you extend to him humanity. And if you recognize your humanity, that means you also recognize mine. And this means that there's a limit to what you can do to me and keep a clear conscience. End of discussion.
The 2021 Black History theme, the Black family, representation, identity, and diversity. Now to hear more is Professor Elder Mahmoud El-Kati.
Hello, everybody. One could not pick a more challenging subject to address than the history of the black family in America. But by way of background, we have to say something about Africa. History is people. It could be another word for human beings, really. Because people are trapped in history, and history is trapped in them, and you can't get away from that. Says James Baldwin, history is not merely or even principally about the past, it's about the present and all that we do. One of the major influences on my life, Dr. John Henry Clark, argued that people use history to tell their political time of day. It is a compass that they use to find themselves on the map of human geography. That's a pretty good conception. I think that history is another word for humanity. No history, no humanity. Human beings have history, conscious history. I don't know if that's true of mice or cat or intelligent whales or whatever. We know there's intelligent life among animals. Some have been compared to human beings, but the fact of the matter is that history is something that we have to respect, even though we live in a country that's the United States of America, which is anti-historical. It's anti-history, not history. That's stuff that we've been taught in public school systems throughout the 20th century and the 21st century. It's largely propaganda. I want you to understand that. That's not true. It's largely mythical. And I mean, nothing is true, but you have myth, which tell us what America has been. You know, that the founding of the country, the winning of the West, all of the Civil War, the biggest event in American history thus far, domestically, is slavery and the Civil War and Reconstruction. Well, the books don't tell us that, the regular books that everybody is exposed to. So it's a history, when you go to school, of really Europeans and their descendants. That's not all there is to it. And a lot of it is can't be taken as seriously so long as African American people are left out of American history. Other people, indigenous populations, same can be said of them in a different way, because the black people were forced into the American story. It was not like an immigrant, written into the American Constitution, Section 1, Article 3, as property. And it's very important for us to understand that black people have been part of every chapter of American history. And it will be so in the future until this chapter is ended. And this is a critical chapter. So I want to say that history is another word for humanity, in my words. If you don't have a history, you're not a human being. Simple as that. And that's the big mistake that Americans who followed the founding fathers and created this gargantuan myth about the revolution and so forth. And let me make this crystal clear. When I say myth, I don't mean it's a fairy tale or something made up to which there's no truth and that sort of thing. All nations have myth. All countries have myth. All countries create a myth of origin and a myth of mission. The origin is these founding fathers who were flawless and faultless human beings who founded the country. And we made them, in effect, demigods, as if they were just a little lower than God. That's just a fact. And some of them were concerned about that Americans would make them into, George Washington especially, some sort of demigods, that they were above being human and so forth. And that's why we have this civil religion. Now, history is also a current event. It's always a current event in the sense that something that happened 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, can affect what will happen in the next 5 minutes. And I say that in the context of our time now, which is drawn from the failure of the Reconstruction to properly place black people as citizens in American life. That's what we are acting out of, the failure of Reconstruction, the winning of the Civil War, and the failure of Reconstruction. Remember, before the Civil War, black people were not defined as human beings, so we didn't have legal families. Most black people, there are exceptions to that. There have always been a handful of people. Slavery is a very complicated legal system. There's always been a handful of people who were, in quote, free. As free Negroes. There's a population of black people in this country who don't have a history of slavery, but they're a very tiny group of people. So they make that very clear. We talk about the critical mass of African Americans. Did not. Single family was an illegal and unlawful entity. They weren't legal, but they formed families anyway, and what we would call, which survived up until this very day, common law marriages. Now, since Emancipation Proclamation, the winning of the Civil War, black people for the first time during Reconstruction were able to have legal families. You know, where they could get married, they could go to a priest, a justice, a priest, a minister, and so forth, get married like anybody else. That was, you can't understate this, overstate this, that was not legal for black people, most of them who were slaves, to go for minister or justice of the peace and be legally married because they were defined as property. Please don't flinch when I say these things because they're going to turn out really beautiful. You watch it, history's tricky things. Don't flinch, but that's what it was. This cruel system, bottomlessly cruel system, as in the words of Martin Luther King, that affected the life of black people. I would argue one of the most remarkable things about black people in America is that they have families at all. And one of the first things that black people wanted after emancipation, after Jubilee, they wanted first families. To put together, Hollywood would never tell this story. You know, John from the Culver plantation looking for Sally from the Johnson plantation, who had two of his children and so forth. And they formed units, and they were legally able to marry. It's an incredible story. It's a story that we ought to be proud of. If we understand the complexity of what it took to have a family at all. So we had family on our minds, finding Keith and Ken. After Civil, we wanted after family, we wanted, get this, education, to learn the magic, to learn how to read and write. Remarkable story of black people building their own institutions in that 30-year period there after the Civil War. Most black schools, colleges were founded during that period. AME alone founded 7 black colleges, the African Methodist Church. Now, so you wanted family, you wanted education, and you wanted to earn money for your labor. There are other things, but they were central to black people. That's what they wanted. And they were able to form families. And I want to say this now, in spite of what we said about black families and disarray and so forth, in a short 35 years after the Civil War, 1865, the end of the Civil War, by the turn of the century, black American families, and this is a miracle, were 85 to 90% stable in some form. How we see the black family now is a modern, a recent attack on the black family. The welfare system played a big role in that. And I have first-hand information like this. I was a social worker for 3 years, so I know how that affected black people's family, tore them apart.
Yep.
And what we see now was not true, even during Reconstruction. People had families. Man-woman thing was almost as typical. That's a miracle, as white families were, who did not have to fight the law to have families. You know, this is maybe the greatest sin that this government has committed against black people, will destroy the families. You say, well, why was that? Because the strongest unit in African culture, every scholar has said this over and over and over, was the family. Of all the great units, what makes up culture, you know, religion, you know, economics, politics, and so forth, the strongest unit was family. And its complex system of kinship is very complex. And that's why African people's families, different from us, in Africa, have more people they claim as kith and kin than we do. Like here we say man, woman, the two-parent family, man, woman, and child. That's not African. It's man, woman, and child, and a variety of other kinships where, for instance, in certain West African countries, people who are first cousins are actually brothers. They don't have any word, brothers and sisters. They don't have any word. There's no such thing as stepdaughter and stepfather. It's crazy to them. There's a wide, complex, and I don't claim to be an expert on this, and they vary from the regions. West Africans have a family form. It's not akin to the family forms in Central Africa. East Africa has its own family forms, as opposed to Central Africa and Southern Africa. I mean, there's a person could have, in South Africa, down where Mandela comes from, we can have 3 or 4 or 5 grandparents. We can have, I think, just 4. It's amazing. But that's the most important thing to understand about black families. And I would refer you to, first, Philip Curtin, Africa and the Africans, who examines African institutions. Andrew Billingsley has done a wonderful work on black families in America. John Blassingame has done a work on black families during slavery, and so forth. And you get these books. Now, what has gotten us to this conversation is somebody outside of our community. What put black families on the front burner was what happened to our people during and after the Roosevelt administration, when something called public assistance was created as a part of this massive recovery program by Franklin Roosevelt. One of the things that was instituted was public assistance, which we commonly call welfare. That's not the name for it. And that's when everybody was in trouble, whether you were black and white. You were either on one side of the counter or the other. You were either giving or receiving welfare. That's the first time that black people had been into anything like that. And like so many things, it was set up for a good purpose. But after it was instituted, it became a mainstay in federal government programs. And how black people got in this trouble, I mean, is during the 1960s, there was a great boom in American economy. We all know about that. The industry and the cars and the little ticky-tacky houses in the suburbs and getting good jobs and so forth. But black people weren't really a part of that. When the new economy was created, that preceded computers and so forth, was an economy that shifted from a machine in the industrial base into the base that we now know as an information society. Our African people were left out of that. And many people, for instance, that I know firsthand, people in Cleveland who've been working for the White Motor Company, which should have been the capital of the automobile industry if Rockefeller had his way. But that's another story. The black people got left out of this transformation from a rural, then an industrial economy, and then into the economy of machines taking over. For instance, you could have a company that's a bakery, but hired. This happened in the 60s and 50s. 10 years earlier, they hired 50 people. But because of computers and machinery, took on pressing buttons and making things happen. You could take 5 people to run that bakery, which was once run by 50 people. And that's one of the trades that black people were in. Among other things was trade. I had one of my play uncles was a baker, and probably in your family too. You don't even think of black people being in those industries. They lost as the economy was transformed from an industrial complex into now an information society. We got trapped. A man who worked for the Wright Motor Company, Ford, when that changed, the other factor was the South, with their low tax base, started inviting these big companies in Detroit to South to relocate. Black people lost out on that. It's more complex than I'm saying, but I'm saying the ugly part of it is that they were trapped by the welfare system in that you're supposed to have a family intact in order to keep welfare. Well, black men were losing the jobs that their fathers held. Like Detroit, the people, this was a good town for black Americans. The people who preceded the 60s got retirement, sent their daughters to Fisk or Morehouse or wherever, and then changed dramatically in the 50s when you start talking about the affluent society, where most of the people were in the middle of the diamond, so to speak, and minorities are at the top and the bottom. American people, the super rich and people at the base, very poor people, were minorities. This was a middle class and so affluent society. The great economists called it affluent society. He's the first one, but there was several people wrote about that, and which created middle class society, and black people weren't a part of that. They were men who had jobs, and I'm something personally, at a given place, say a Ford or a White Motor Company, worked for 18 years, and when that company moved south, he was out of a job. He couldn't re-enter the labor force because he had to pass a test. Before, you didn't have to pass the test. You have strong arm, fairly intelligent, you can do semi-skilled and skilled labor. And so families were partly broken up by the welfare system. They had a lot of out-of-work lawyers to come into people's house at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning to see if a man was there under the bed looking for shoes for him. And that's what broke up partly, abolished the black family. Now, I don't have the time, sadly, but here's how I got on the doctor. Daniel P. Moynihan of the Jansen administration, a professor, one of these guys, he read a book, Black Families in America by E. Franklin Frazier, which is a great, he's a powerful black sociologist, the most widely known sociologist, taught at Howard University for years, was once the president of the American Sociology Society. He is the one who wrote, he put this word in our vocabulary, black bourgeoisie. We didn't say that, you say bourgeois now, but I'm saying, it's E. Franklin Frazier put that word in our vocabulary. It's written on the black middle class, in which he kind of didn't treat them very well, let me put it that way. And so he was down on black families, and he thought that the black family had been destroyed by slavery, and there weren't many African elements left. A white cultural and social anthropologist, Melville Herskovitz, at Northwestern University. This is a white man. That's why you can't go into this race thing. Who elevated the discussion of black family, where he looked for the Africanisms in black family structure. And so how we were doing why we still have these kinship systems, like we have these aunts and uncles who are not really akin to you. I'm 13 years old before I know that Aunt Ellen wasn't my real blood aunt, you know, because that's the Africanism left over, you know, that his family was much more
extended families.
Yeah. These kind of things happen. So then Herskovitz, who is white, argued that there were Africanisms in black families, as they are all over the West Indies and Brazil and Cuba. You see that very well. It is harder to see in America. But we have these traditions. One of them is try to hold on to kinship, certain the way we fellowshipped around food and so forth. He pointed them out. Now, the massive black scholars agreed with Herskovitz, not with the black sociologists. See, I'm proud of them for that. You know, they're trapped in the race thing, because we don't belong in that. We have to reject the notion that people belong to distinct, discrete races, because that's not true. It's unscientific. Finally, the scientific community has said that race is a myth. E. Franklin Frazier, not E. Franklin Frazier, but Dr. Ashley Montague wrote the powerful book which turned me on, because the myth of race, the man's most dangerous myth, is the fallacy of race. It's a fallacy. It looks real, but it isn't, and it can be deconstructed very easily if you sit down for a minute and listen to somebody who's relatively informed on that. And there are people who are well informed on that. And the point is that in social science, who made a major contribution to racism as a practice, an institutional practice, also help to overcome racism. Is the people like Ashley Montague and Ruth Benedict, and those people challenged this thing that people had, that genetics determined everything about you. And they went a while with that. They said that people with too much hair on their body were criminally inclined. You have crooked teeth, you like to be a crook, you know. That's pseudoscience. That's not real science. Well, they were overthrown after World War II. And the science, they've come out. I've been a part of this myself at the Minnesota Science Museum with an anthropologist. I took the side that I knew, and he took the side that he knew about family, and we agreed, you know, that about race and family. So, what I'm trying to say is that black families are now making a recovery because we're understanding ourselves better. But I don't want to put it all on the welfare system, but I think it's a major part of, and you condition people to being, recipients. And, the next generation don't remember when black people were independent, not on welfare system. For instance, I didn't know anything about welfare that you never been around anybody until I moved to Cleveland, Ohio. That's when I got turned on to the welfare system. When I was looking for a job, and one of my cousins said, I know how you can get some money. Just go to the welfare. I don't know, what is the welfare? Well, hell, I studied the welfare in school and didn't know it was what they call the welfare. I mean, it's just crazy that they got us. But black families has been one of the most incredible stories among all the stories that black people have created about strength and resilience and love and courage, I say it's a miracle that we have black families at all. And they should not be judged by the same standards of white families who never had the government against having families. That's what black people were. The government was outlawed our family. I'm talking about Uncle Sam, the United States government, in its Constitution, the first drafting of the American Constitution, Article 1, Section 3, defined black people as both property and persons, which means we were not whole human beings. We were 3/5 of other free persons. That is one of the greatest crimes in the history of humanity, that we were eliminated legally from the human race. And we have to talk about that. I know it's painful, and try to understand that when in these arguments, particularly now. So I hope I said something that makes sense to you, because it's hard to catch up. We're in the catch-up mode now about our history. This happens to be the 100th anniversary of the observance of African American History Month. It was instituted in 1926. Don't forget that.
95th.
Yeah, it's the 95th. I'm sorry, overstated the case. It was founded in 1926, and this has been a part of our culture. It's the culture. People create culture. God doesn't give you culture. You have to create it. That's a cultural thing. Kwanzaa is created. Nobody. The Lord didn't give it to you, but now it's a part of our being. It's a part of our humanity. It's a part of our peculiar and beautiful humanity. That's how, and we create culture. Just as you create a dance, or a song, or make a discovery, a new way to work and improve workmanship. So our families, which is a basic unit of culture, has been under attack ever since we got off those slave ships. And that's still true, relatively. Less so than before. So again, you got to remember that we are getting out of this thing. We've been trapped by the society and all of its institutional forces to make us Negroes and not proud African people. That's where we are. People come from geography. That's where your name comes from. It doesn't come from skin color. It comes from geography. Everybody, white people, yellow people, red people. There's no yellow language. There's Chinese. There's no white language. There's French, German. There's no black language per se. There's Yoruba, Hausa, Igbo, Swahili, and so forth. And now with the transformation where we had to create a new language, I think black people, Ebonics is a language. Black English is real to people who study languages. It has rules. It's a great thing that we've created here and share with the world. The language comes to white Americans mostly through our music, where they pick up on like speech patterns and so forth. But we created Ebonics is legitimate because human beings create language, and it changes through time and space. I'm going to leave you with the words of the founding father of African American History Month, J Woodson, who founded this institution, who wrote the great book, The Miseducation of the Negro. And to that, he said, how we got to get out of this is to understand it first. How we've been miseducated, misnamed, miss everything, if you want to say. Because we live under this doctrine of white supremacy, which causes these things to happen to us. He said if you can control man's thinking, you do not have to worry about his action. If you can determine what a man shall think, you do not have to concern yourself about what he will do. If you can make a man feel that he's inferior, you do not have to compel him to seek inferior status. He will do so without being told. If you can make a man feel that he is justly an outcast, you do not have to order him to the back door. Well, if there's no back door, the very nature of the man would demand that you carve one out. Thank you. End of discussion.